Hey guys, Gandalf Monkey here. This is my first speed paint with narration, and you have probably noticed that I already did a sketch of Kirishima before recording this. Like, you'll see the little sketch there, it was probably there in the first second. I didn't originally plan to record this, but I decided that I would since it was gonna take a long time to do. So, I start off recording by doing a sketch of Fatgum and then Tamaki. Tamaki's sketch doesn't end up bad, but I do change it later on in the video, and I'll explain why when we get to that. Here's when I start to get into the details of the face. You see that I'm working on like the mask, and then I start to do the line art for the teeth. I start by just going for the really sharp edges. The whole thing is just sharp edges, and like, I did my best to emphasize all the shading and shadows. I thickened the lines as much as I could, add as many cracks. I used the pen tool, but looking back, I think I should have used the pen sharp tool because that would have probably made it a lot easier because then I wouldn't have had a rounded edge for the back of where I was lining. Though, to be honest, both worked. The regular pen tool worked in the long run, so I guess I can't really complain. You can see now that I'm working on the costume right here, and it is getting very choppy in the footage. I'm sorry for that. I tend to zoom in and out quite a lot. And I was trying to work on that gear thing that Kirishima has, and it wasn't working at first because, well, I didn't really plan out how the shoulder worked, how the shoulder would like be shaped. So I had to make those circles, those ellipses that you saw earlier, just so I could shape out that gear. And then I just do some simple line art for his, just for the edges on his shoulder, and then I start for like the forearm, where the forearm and elbow meets the rest of the arm, and I do like a quick sketch. Well, not really a sketch, but I do practice line art for the forearm. It will get changed afterwards. Yeah, you see as I erase there, and I start doing the line art just for the shoulder and how far and where the arm meets the elbow. The upper arm? I don't know. And I try to do a similar technique that Horikoshi uses in the manga for Kirishima's hardened skin, where it just uses the same similar repeating line patterns in the edges to get that cool effect of the skin folding in on itself. I was basing it off the manga for the most part. And here I do a new sketch for the knuckles, and I'm honestly very proud of how the knuckles ended up turning out. And like that start of it is really what helped making it's a very geometric, I guess is the right word. A lot of flat edges on the knuckles, and just having the skin, like, it looks like it's layering up, like it's folding upwards onto itself, and yeah, I'm very proud of how it's turning out. Oh, always nice to add a few spikes in there on the side of the elbow. Now, as you see, as I'm working on the forearm, I am having some issue because, some of those lines seem like pretty curved. So I had to kind of redo a good chunk of it. In fact, yeah, I ended up redoing a lot of it multiple times over, just so I could be confident in how sharp and flat the edges are supposed to be. And yeah, I spent a good amount of time on that. And I'll come back to narrating when we get to another important part of the video. Here I'm using the blur tool when I'm working on the robes that I made on Kirishima's arm, and then I start doing the line art for his torso. The torso was actually a surprisingly fun part to do, just because it was very simple shapes, very simple line work, and just having the thick dark lines just helps emphasize like how tough it's supposed to be. I did have a little bit of trouble like with the back of it, and then just a little bit of detail to show like where the nose is, and then working on the belt, which ended up being a little bit too curved, so I started making it a lot more straight, like, yeah, you see as I cut off the top of it, put that the R for the red right symbol. And then I did, in a little bit, you're gonna see that I used a smaller brush for some of the line art here, just so it wouldn't all be super thick. You'd see that there are some small details. It's mostly on the side of the torso, where as it like goes closer to his backside. Because I realized when trying to use the thicker brush, it just didn't seem right. So I decided to use the thinner brush, and it worked a lot better. Just to add those nifty details, I did make a few mistakes, so I decided to change it up a bit, make the edges much rougher, instead of having like a flat wall of a back, have all those edges, and it definitely helped work it out. It was really helpful to use like the thinner brush just like inside the pecs, and it really gave it a lot more depth. Then I started working on the cloth for a little bit. The shape of that was actually more complicated than I expected, but I think it's just the correction on my brush at the time. Here, what's going to be the fun part, not the pants here, right after I start working on the hair. And I use a shape tool to, just make a bunch of random sharp-edged shapes. And I just do that, and I just go ham on like the entire head. It's just like exploding sharp edges, which is kind of the point, really. And it's really fun. Well, okay, I wouldn't say really fun, but it was definitely the funnest part about doing the hair. And then I'm gonna have to go back and put detail in every single one of those shapes. And then at that point I realized, oh, I still have one more arm to do. Great. And you see as I start to try to put some detail in the shoulder, and I have to do another shoulder gear. I don't know what that is supposed to be, but like what's up with that? But honestly, I really like the costume design. And this arm was definitely much easier because I had a much better sketch and easier angle to draw it from. So it was much easier than the larger forearm. And of course, because of that, it didn't take as long. Try to like put some like a perspective as if it's like coming out of like the elbow, and it has almost like a sort of flatter edge, like it just bends, and it bends outwards and then goes back inwards towards the wrists. I don't know if it shows at all. And really, I just kept doing line art for the rest of this segment. And yeah, I'll recontinue the narration when we get to the coloring. Alright, at this point, I had started a new recording. I had taken a break after I'd finished lining Kirishima, and I started doing line work for Fatgum. This great boy, wonderful boy. So, really, there isn't too much to talk about. Um, he was actually more complicated than I had expected, just because I'm not used to doing very round characters in digital art. And I started off by giving him like pretty like focused eyes, and I do the zipper thing, which honestly I keep looking up different images for his costume, and there aren't that many of them, or of thin fat gum, and the zipper's honestly pretty inconsistent in a lot of the images, but I went with the one that I trusted the most. And yeah, this one took longer than expected, but it was still about as easy as I anticipated. The real, like, complicated one was just for the legs, because most drawings of him don't show his costume by the legs. Probably because it's the most complicated part. I found it just actually kind of a lot of fun just doing the letters in his costume. And while doing this drawing, I realized that his costume has letters on it. I never noticed that before today. Well, before I drew this. And yeah, like I noticed a lot more things about his costume that I didn't know before. Like I think he wears fingerless gloves, which, or at least I thought he did. But it really depends on how people color the fan art. Because I used some fan art. Because when you look up pictures of Fatgum, at least at the time, all of that I found was fan art, and I couldn't find a lot of like actual scans of like the character. So I wasn't sure if it was actual fingerless gloves. But luckily he had been revealed in the anime, so to use screenshots from that as reference, and I found out he does not have fingerless gloves. It's just really confusing depending on who's drawing him. The hands were actually pretty complicated. Hands are usually pretty complicated, but he has like the big fat meaty hands, and that took a bit. That took a bit of time. I didn't put a lot of detail in him. I didn't put a lot of detail in him or Tamaki, just because they're in the background. Though I did learn that his costume has a lot more smaller details that I didn't even know existed. Like I said, his costume was the biggest surprise, just because there was a lot more than I thought there was to it, which is actually pretty good. He is a very simple character, but his costume has a lot of tiny things that go into it, like all those little lines in the design, which honestly makes him look like, although it's not much, it does just help add some, it just helps add to the costume. It adds a little bit of depth. These, whatever they are in his kneecaps, like on his like knee protectors, I don't know why they're there. I don't know if they're like little capsules of food, if they're screws. Maybe they're just to look cool. Like, don't you want some cool kneecaps, right? I don't. I don't know what's going on here. But I don't know what was going on with his costume. But yeah, the feet were by far just the most complicated part of him. Just because I didn't know that I didn't have a lot of references to go off of. I didn't know that his feet had so much detail in it, which I guess is why there's not that many references, because not that many people want to draw him. But going by the other foot, I I do kind of change. I'm pretty sure by what I remember, I do kind of change what his hind foot looks like. However, even with all the detail that goes in it, it doesn't really end up showing in the final drawing, because do change his position to the other side of the canvas, just because, well, you'll see when we get to Tamaki. But yeah, here I'm finishing up the line work on his feet, on his shoes, and it stopped for a little bit because I'm pretty sure I took a break and forgot to stop recording, or was trying to figure out what I want to do. And yeah, there's the shoes, and Oh, the reason it stopped for a second there is because I forgot to stop the recording, and yeah, we're in a new recording. You're seeing footage from a new recording just a few hours later, I believe. Yeah. So I ended up moving him around a lot, and here's when I decided to change his eyes because the focused look didn't really fit him. He's a much more happy-go-lucky kind of character, so I decided to just give him full-on round eyes. And Tamaki here, he was absolutely the most difficult character to draw, even though I made him the smallest out of all of them, which might have actually made it harder because his costume has so much going on. It's so detailed. There's a lot of cloth in it. He has all the robes, he has the mask, he has the armor on his arms, he has all the pockets, and he has like his feet and his hair and the mask and he has like smaller eyes, which I'm not like. I like doing detailed, like energetic eyes, so I don't have a lot of experience doing smaller eyes, and that mask was much more of a pain than I expected it to be. Probably because I still need to work on like drawing geometric shapes. And yeah, I spent like Tamaki. Arguably, okay, Tamaki was actually the hardest character to draw. Kirishima just took the longest, and here you see that I'm finally changing his pose. I decided to give him the clam on his right hand, and then give him the octopus fingers. I do I do kind of do a strategy when drawing him, and I think it also helps me learn something about Horikoshi when he draws him. So with the octopus fingers, you won't see it yet, but you know how the octopus has like the little suckers on it, right? The suckers on Tamaki's tentacles are on the back of the tentacle, so like on the back of the hand. It's more like on the knuckle, which honestly, it is kind of weird to think about, but I think I know why. Because in doing this, I learned those are a pain to draw, and they're probably in the back of the hand just so that Horikoshi didn't have to draw them as much. But that's just me being like me theorizing. But I think that'd be the case because drawings like all those little suckers would just be a pain. And there I'm doing a sketch of his costume and like you're seeing like there's all those little patterns to it. He has like this vest with like was it like 9 different pockets in it? And I never realized that his thumb was like I forgot that his fingers show up in the clam thing. But honestly, the clam just made it easier to draw because the clam it didn't have to worry about how the hand looked. I just needed to add a few fingers onto a clamshell. It was just a really easy design. And to be honest, I went through a lot more trouble than I had to. I could have just had Tamaki partially obscured by Kirishima. Actually, I do end up having him partially obscured, so I didn't really have to draw all of him or even color all of him later on. But I did it anyways because I couldn't really finish it knowing that I didn't really finish it, if that makes sense. Yeah, and there you see I'm like doing sketches for the pockets. That vest was an absolute pain to draw. It's not even like difficult, it's just I'm not used to drawing stuff like that on my drawing tablet. I use a Wacom tablet, by the way, so it's not as accurate as a Huion. I don't know if I pronounced that correctly. So it took a longer while than I expected to just put those little details. Though though it does make me happy that I made him smaller so I didn't have to put too much detail into it. I just had to have it enough to look like, oh, he has the lines and everything. This foot honestly came out pretty good, though it does end up looking like his toes like broken or something like that. Though and it does end up being hidden later on because of where he's going to be positioned. This foot on his left foot, honestly, it came out far better than I expected. I'm not really used to drawing feet, so the fact that I drew a foot and it looks pretty good, I'm proud of. Like, I usually don't draw feet. Like, I usually draw like half body drawings, and any full bodies they have shoes on usually. So that was just pretty new for me. And yeah, I usually do hands, which are still complicated as heck. And you see here, I'm finally doing the suckers that I mentioned earlier. You see, it's just a pain to do because you have to do like they come in by twos, but by having them on the back of the hand, you don't even have to draw them all because they're obscured by where they're by their position. I do get kind of lazy in coloring it later on because I just color them. I don't really color them like the colors the suckers should be, and I probably should have, but to be honest, I didn't think anyone would really care, and I didn't really care enough for the little suckers being there for me to bother coloring them when really it's just gonna be attached to the octopus tentacles. And yeah, you see that I repositioned them, and I'm finally getting into the coloring here. And the coloring stage was such a relief because I was finally done with the line art, and this is just so much faster. There might be something that some of you might be noticing, and it's that the colors might are a little off on Kirishima, and that is because I'm colorblind and I got confused on what the color of his outfit was. Also because my reference was in was the manga and it was a black and white image. So I just assumed so I think I just used the colors I remembered, and to be honest, being colorblind and trying to do a color from memory isn't really the best option. It does get fixed later on and I'll point it out when I do. But yeah, so I just threw all my colors on there and then just put the little edges there. And I'm just going in for the color, filling in all like the erased space, all the empty space, making sure like I get all my flats on there. And I keep them all in separate layers because if not, then what am I doing? And like just looking at how it is right there, I'm so content with how the colors are coming out. This here, yeah, so the robes I did on their own layer because I had their line art be blurred just so that they could look like they're being torn more easily, and I thought it really helped with the look. Coloring them was a little bit more tricky because I had to do them on a layer above the line art so it would cover it. But if I did that, it could mess some stuff up, so I ended up putting it on the layer below the line art, and I had to erase on the line art that was on top of it. Which, I don't know which one would have been the better call, but this one came out pretty good in my mind. There is an issue later because of how it's colored that I had to correct. But like seeing it in Speedpaint and thinking and like seeing how it's being colored in like super speed, I it's honestly really satisfying after how long it took just seeing it all like get filled up with the on the video. Sorry if I stutter quite a bit. I'm a little tired. So yeah. See me coloring it in for a little while, and then I'm just erasing so many edges and lines, which honestly hurt a little bit personally, just because I spent so long doing those lines and then I had to erase them. But just looking at it with the line art and the flats, I was already just so happy with how it was looking. And then I start getting into the shading, and the shading just blew it blew me out of the water. It was looking so much better immediately. I decided to go for like a darker like brownish color for like the very dark shading of the skin. But like as you saw like under the chin, and then I just went with dark reds obviously for the hair. And at first I was trying to do like a watercolor thing, but then I decided the pen tool was much better since it was also angular anyways. And yeah, and then when I turned off the colors, it honestly just made it a lot easier to see what where to shade, because I already knew where I wanted the light to come from, and then having it all be in white and put the shading in without seeing the colors. On one hand, I have to make sure that I'm using the right colors, but on the other hand, this looks really cool personally. Part of me kind of wanted to keep just an image of it black and white, but the only color being from the shading, because personally I loved how it looked. And I just spend the next few minutes just shade, well, I guess technically hours for me, minutes for you. Um just shading the hair and the skin. Yeah, like here this took about like an hour maybe or two. Yeah, just look at that. And then I start working on the other arm, which is kind of ironic since I started with his right arm, but now I'm doing the left one first. I guess because it was smaller, that's why I started it first this time. And yeah, I'm just doing shading for most of this, to be honest. Oh yeah, I ended up fixing those eyes because I realized that I had made the eyes round, and Kirishima's hardened even his eyeballs, his pupils. So I had to fix that, make them more like rupee shaped. Yeah, and it's just a lot of shading. Yeah, I'll get back to you when like there's something to talk about. So here, so we're seeing that I'm reworking on a little bit of line art and shading. And this is when I realized that I colored his costume wrong, so I had to redo the coloring for some of it. Luckily, it wasn't too hard because everything was on different frames, so I literally just used the fill tool for nearly all of it. The real issue was just like the little cape, because I had to kind of use the fill tool, and honestly, in hindsight, probably could have used the clipping tool to fix the cape instead of recoloring it all. I could have just used the clipping tool on that, and it would have probably fixed itself. And yeah, but it was also the first time I had used the clipping tool, and I hadn't used it at that moment yet. But if I had, I probably should have done it there. I'm now realizing in hindsight. And yeah, I'm just doing some last minute shading on Kirishima's outfit. Yeah, his costume is, honestly, I'm so proud. And I use a watercolor here on the cape just to give it some more depth, make it look more roughed up, more clothy, I guess is the word. Less flat. And yeah, this is when I finally start using the clipping tool. And you put a green background just so I can tell everything apart. It's not, the background doesn't end up being green. I just use it so that I can, just so I can see like the differences very well. Since Kirishima uses red and black, the green is a really nice contrast, so I can tell really easily. No, I am colorblind, so I guess it's not the best one, but I use the dark green and every other color is very bright, so it works. And honestly, just doing this line art, like all these different like levels looked really cool to me. And there you saw I finished Kirishima, and I started doing the coloring for Fatgum. It was like again, he's a very simple design. It's just there's a whole just a good bunch of tiny things in there enough to work on. Like there, I forgot to do line art for his jacket, like on his upper arm, and I just threw every color out there, and I realized that there's a lot of colors, a lot of little details to do, despite how like he looks really simple, but I have to go in there and keep all the colors away from all those like thin little lines there, and it was honestly kind of a pain to color him. Fatgum was surprisingly difficult, yet surprisingly simple at the same time. His design is it's something. It's just not what I'm used to. And yeah, right now everything is teleporting on the screen because I keep zooming in and out for the whole thing, and I know it's probably very irritating for the eyes. Luckily, with how fast it's going, it shouldn't be doing it for too much longer. The real fear I have is when we get to Tamaki, because Tamaki's I teleport quite a bit too. I remember, because I had to zoom in and out so much. And yeah, like now I'm just working on the pants area for Fatgum. Again, it's just more like I don't know how else to describe it. It's just more complicated than you expect it to be. You just expect him to to just be a round like yellow or yellow orange ball with like black pants. But then you don't expect these like gauntlets. I decided to do the flights for Tamaki before I do the shading for both of them. Just because I just want to get all the colors on there. I don't think I finish like doing the flights for him. I think I just put all the colors on there just cuz I want to get that done. I want to have all those colors on there. I don't really remember exactly. I just remember he was a very complicated one. It took me quite a bit of time. Yeah, there I'm like working on his robes, and the robes were honestly the simplest part of his design. It's the vest. The vest, no matter what, was just a complete pain in the butt to do. But that doesn't change the fact that I really love how his design looks. It's a really useful it's a very practical costume. His power is absolutely incredible. Like he has like one of the most versatile abilities, and he's definitely like a top tier hero. Like he would be like extremely powerful even like the Marvel universe. Though it's hard to say which universe is stronger between Marvel and My Hero, but like I don't know where I'm going with this. Debate in the comments below. And yeah, here I'm coloring his tentacles, and I don't color the little suckers like a lighter pink. I just choose to keep it all the same color just because I really didn't feel like I cared enough about those that it would matter. Especially since he's not even going to be in the foreground, he's in the background. So I decided to just leave those alone. It wasn't going to change much. Yeah, and all of his flats were done then, and here I'm finally getting to Fatgum's shading. And this is another recording, right, as well. You have no idea how many breaks I took in recording. Like, I spent so much time, I couldn't do it all in one sitting, obviously. And yeah, this is just shading for the rest of this, so I'll just come back when it gets close to the end, alright? And now we've reached near the end. I'm just doing the backgrounds at this part. And this wasn't really difficult. It was just I'm not even 100% proud of what I ended up making at the end because well, the background ended up being really simple, though to be honest, it's not bad because it still keeps the attention on the characters. And yeah, this I was tempted to do something different, but yeah, this background is what I end up going for at the end. And yeah, and that's the end of the video. Thank you guys for watching. I know this video is extremely long, but yeah, I hope you enjoyed. Have a wonderful day, and if you want more, any future drawings are definitely going to be much shorter than this. Have a great day, guys. Gandalf Monkey out.